This is Bharat FM.
बजेगा भारत झूमेगा भारत.
ये है भारत FM.
बजेगा भारत झूमेगा भारत.
Namaskar, Sat Sri Akal, welcome and adab. You are listening to Bharat FM, a one-of-its-kind, multilingual, eclectic provider of entertainment, information and news to Indian Americans. Headquartered in Cincinnati, Ohio, Bharat FM airs shows out of Cincinnati, Chicago and Phoenix. We take pleasure in our ability to cater to your bhakti, chusti, sfurti, shakti and masti needs with our audio and visual shows. Check out bharatfm.com for our online program schedule and archives. I'm sure the content will definitely tickle your senses. Tune in via the 24-hour web streaming on bharatfm.com or via the Bharat FM app. More information can be procured at 513-488-5070.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Things We Carry. My name is Varshini. I'm so excited for today's guest. This is Vishavjit Singh. I'm going to let him introduce himself because one of the lines in his bio is that he likes to create perpetual confusion to open doors for more questions, for more exploration and moments of introspection, which is basically what this entire show is about and the premise of a lot of our conversations. So I'm going to let him introduce himself. As always, thank you so much to Bharat FM as well as Saas for Cause for making this possible. And Saas for Cause is still continuing so much of their work for marginalized communities within the South Asian community. So if you or anyone you know needs someone to talk to, needs help in any facet of your life with mental or physical health, please reach out to them. Their information is going to be in the description of the show. But hello and welcome. And I know this took a long time to schedule, but I am so happy to have you here. Please give our audience your intro because it is so interesting.
Thank you for having me, Varshini. Pleasure is mine as well. Introductions are always tricky. I struggle to always sort of figure out, okay, what labels do I want to use? Because the kind of work that I do, I just feel it's just, we all have stories, right? So how do you introduce yourself? I am living in New York City, which is home for many years now. I'm a storyteller, artist, cartoonist, public speaker in the DEI, diversity, inclusion, equity space. My past, have been an engineer for many years, 15 years, have a public health background, have born in the US, spent most of my childhood in India. And, we were actually very close to the 20th anniversary of 9/11. And 9/11, when the tragedy of 9/11 happened, I was actually working and living very close to New York City. So it had a profound impact on where my life took me. So, that I'm an artist today, and a lot of the work that I do today is in large part because of what transpired in the days after and months and years after 9/11, because a lot of people who look like me and many others have faced a lot of, unfortunately, ignorance and bias and hate from fellow Americans.
Yeah, that is a very powerful intro. And everything that you said, we're going to dive a lot more into because I think especially this is very timely, like you said, because of the 20th anniversary of 9/11, which impacted, I think, the childhood and the growth and the way a lot of South Asians who look like you see themselves and what they thought their place was in a landscape that was shifting so dramatically, where one minute you had this very normal, probably idyllic childhood, and the next minute you are being compared to people who perpetuated terrible crimes that affected so many people. And yeah, as much as you are willing to talk about that, we can get into, but thank you so much for your intro. And I think we're going to start with our usual first question. What is your immigration story, whether it's yours personally in this country or your family's?
Yeah, I mean, my parents came here as immigrants. My dad actually came to the US to work. He actually worked for the Indian government. So he was an Indian government employee, even in the US at the embassy. And so I was born here, became a citizen, of course. Parents moved back to India, and so I spent a lot of my childhood in India, which was great. I got to learn languages and learn so much about my own culture and broadly, South Asian Indian cultures. And then, one of the big things sort of that happened, and I'll briefly mention it. But for me, one of the formative things that also happened is I lived through, and a lot of folks, sort of older folks, maybe, folks in their 30s, 40s probably know about this and beyond, is 1984. And so the 1980s in India were really a very sort of impactful time, and a lot of political sort of struggles with Sikhs and Punjab and the Indian state. So I actually lived through those, and those were really, at the moment, I didn't realize it, but, my family came very close to death, and we were lucky. Our neighbors sort of helped us sort of survive that moment in November 1984. I came back to the US after high school, lived in California first, in Ohio, Northern California, Connecticut, New York. So I've moved around a lot, which is not an unusual immigrant experience either, right? I mean, you move around to find places, jobs take you places. And so, I've been in New York City now for many years. I mean, I feel at home. I'm an American. I don't step out and go, oh, I'm different. But I think it's people around you and events that transpire that make you at times feel like, okay, you don't belong, or you're reminded in words you don't belong. That's been part of my story, I would say, for most part, all my life. And I've just, as many immigrants, you figure out a way of just living with it, growing with it, and doing your level best. So you work harder. You sometimes are harder on yourself. And I have to thank my parents. They, like most parents, they've provided me as much as they could as middle class parents. And yeah, so that's kind of the arc of my immigrant story.
Yeah. And when you came to this country, when your family came here, were you going into a community? Did you have a support system already here, or was it very much you had to rely on each other after, just witnessing horrible situations and just have to process together? Or was there a larger community that you could kind of like relate to and be surrounded by?
So yeah, great question. And we all we come sort of in different ways. So because I was a citizen, I knew I was going to come back to the US after high school, which I did, but I came by myself.
Wow.
So that was a very difficult experience. Yeah, I came by myself. I stayed with a family for a few weeks, and there were some family issues, which again happen, right? You think you have family here and that family is going to support you. Well, I had family that did not support me in terms of hosting me for beyond a few weeks. So I was on my own, and probably the hardest time of my life was in my late teenage years, early adulthood, trying to figure out, navigate this new place that I'm coming back to. I'm seeing it as my home. I'm born here, but I came back to city of Los Angeles, which is one of the most diverse places. You would think, I would not get harassed there, but I did. People, strangers out on streets laughed at me, called me names. This is the late 80s, early 90s. So back even then, this is pre 9/11, but I was made to feel like, I'm somebody who's coming from another planet. And this is hard. I'm also shy and introvert, so I didn't really reach out to for help and told anyone except, wrote some letters to my father back in India. So it was a very difficult time. And it basically, I felt so uncomfortable that basically by the time I was in sophomore year in college and University of California, I took off my turban, cut off my hair. I wanted to fit in. I didn't want to stand out. I kind of even moved away from really having a whole lot of South Asian friends, did not speak my native tongue, and I just really wanted to fit in. So yeah, that was kind of a struggle for the college years, but college was great as well. So I had a great college experience. I got lost. I had identity crisis, but I also made some great friends. I read a lot. I fell in love with books. That's probably what saved me. And found myself. It took me 10 years, to get comfortable in my skin, but I did find myself. And actually, interestingly, through books, I discovered another faith which comes out of India, although now it's all over the globe, Buddhism.
Mhm.
And that was Buddhism is sort of what grounded me in, okay, you know what? It's struggles are okay. Find your center, figure out what you want to be. And eventually then I came back into the faith that I was born into, Sikhism and Sikh path. And that was late 20s. So 10 years passed by where I realized, you know what? Okay, I'm going to embrace this faith that I was born into. I'm going to embrace the mother tongue that I had. So yeah, that kind of, it's a long journey, but
A worthy one.
yes.
Yeah. And to hear you say, like late 80s, early 90s, this discrimination was already happening, right? I think at least for my generation, there's this perception that like it happened because of 9/11. Like we were seen a certain way because of that, because of media portrayals. But you bring up a really good point that I think a lot of us are ignorant to before, I think even, for example, the Trump era, like all of this existed. All of this already existed and was in people's hearts and minds. And it didn't take this one cataclysmic event to bring it out because there were already simmerings of it. And just because they weren't as loud doesn't mean they didn't like profoundly affect people's lives like you. I mean, it is such an outward expression of your religion and faith that you walk in. And to just be like, I am going to remove all of this that is such a big part of me, and then spend time trying to fit in. And that, I feel like cognitive dissonance in your own body probably was horrible. You're not yourself. And I think people underestimate the impact that can have on your mental health, on how you interact with people, the situations you choose to put yourself in. So was there any specific event where you were like, I can't do this anymore? Like, this is not working for me. I need to figure out like how to realign with myself and what I want.
I think it added up. I mean, like I mentioned, I was born an introvert. I mean,
Yeah.
shy kid. I got bullied a lot. I didn't tell anyone I was getting bullied in school or out on the streets, or sometimes families. You get bullied in your families. We don't talk about how sometimes your uncles or aunts or your cousins can judge you, use words. And I just didn't tell anyone, which, it's a lesson that I've learned. And I can, if anybody who's listening to this, I can certainly, one of the biggest lessons I've learned in life is, it's okay. Difficult times happen. We all have vulnerabilities. We all have weaknesses, and that is okay. But what is not okay is not to tell somebody. We all should have at least one human being we can trust and share our darkest secrets. And sometimes, going through difficult times. But I didn't do that. So I just had this pattern of going through hardships, getting bullied, living through 84, and then coming back and people telling me out on streets of LA, genie, raghead, laughing on my face. I just, I did write some letters to my father. I was so uncomfortable that for the first time and the only time in my life, I wrote letters to my father. But I didn't really have any, I didn't know who to reach out to for support, who to tell, hey, I'm going through this. So by the time I'm in sophomore year, I'm like, okay, I just don't want to stand out. Not that people, University of California system is pretty diverse, although the campus I went to was not very diverse, but nobody was really threatening me or saying things. But I think I just felt so uncomfortable broadly in American society. And I just said, okay, I'm just going to try to fit in. To advocate for yourself, and I know you mentioned sometime, mental health struggles, struggles of feeling alone and not fitting in. And we tend to think that if you're going through those experiences and we share them, somehow you're weak. If I were to tell something to my younger self, it's like, look, we all have vulnerabilities. To share them, to talk about them actually takes courage. And through that courage, you can heal and perhaps become even stronger. Yeah. And that is what I would share with everyone. Do not look down upon somebody who's sharing their tender moments, their difficult moments. It takes courage to do that. And so people who talk about mental health issues, and I know we were talking about Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka, right? I mean,
we can get into that. We should get into that because some of the comments I saw about that girl, I was horrified. I was like, hello, this is a sport. Can we have some perspective? She's a human being. performing the
Yeah,
most
I think
stunts.
we tend to just think, these sports persons have a lot of privilege. They are performing for us,
Yeah,
and they have comfort. They have money. Those are presumptions we make, that they are living in comfort. They make a lot of money, so they should just keep performing. We don't know what their stories are. We don't know what they've gone through. These are young women who have spent most of their lives working their tails off to achieve the level of excellence they're achieving, but
yes,
they're also given up a lot of things, right? I mean, I don't even know what it means to be at that level, spending thousands of hours
yeah,
of your young life to become, and then being told you have to show up for these conferences. You cannot show any vulnerability. You cannot have any weaknesses. So yeah, we have to have these conversations. And of course, we come from a, Desi culture. South Asian culture is very sort of strict about, let's not even talk about these things.
yeah,
American culture is a little better, but we have issues here as well. But I have the biggest, the second biggest lesson I've learned is vulnerabilities are these amazing moments. If you embrace them, you can find channels to healing, and perhaps so many sort of maybe better things in life. Maybe
yeah,
courage comes out of vulnerability, but we don't tend to talk about it. But there's research now talking about how people who embrace their vulnerabilities rather than running away from them or hiding them actually find more healthful, wealthful ways to find their courage. I mean, I'll give one example: comic books, right? Most of us love comic books. Comic books have this theme where superheroes have vulnerabilities as well. So even in Indian mythology, you look at these superheroic characters, right? They have vulnerabilities too, and somehow they figure out ways of overcoming those vulnerabilities. So if our mythological superheroes can have vulnerabilities, well, we do as well. Let's talk about them.
yeah, I agree. And I think also as a South Asian man, this is probably an extra difficult thing to come to terms with, because I mean, I think it is probably easier for women to talk about these things, at least with each other. But I'm sure there's extra pressure for you as like a South Asian man. And probably you were in an environment, I can assume, that did not encourage that. And from what you're saying, it didn't. And did you go to UCSB by any chance?
I did, yes. That was where I transferred from Ohio State system and I went to UC Santa Barbara. That's interesting. How did you guess?
I saw your bio. So yeah, I mean, I went to UCSB. I went what year was it? 2014 to 2016. And
So
I can tell you, even then, I managed to find the only Indian people, brown people, South Asian people on campus. But I will tell you that from what you're saying, not much has changed in terms of that ratio. So it was pretty startling for me to go from like Cerritos, where it is so diverse,
yes.
and white people were the minority growing up in my eyes, to then be like, oh my God, what is going on here? It is very jarring, even now, even today.
Wow.
And
Yeah, and it was more so back then. And good people, but yes, the thing is, when you grow up being sort of,
yeah,
we don't live in a society where we see everyone else as equals. So when
yeah,
you have that narrative, yeah, when you go to spaces where it's like suddenly like you stand out, you're like, whoa, okay, this is America. So yeah, it is yeah, they are yeah, it's there's just so many challenges, but yes, I do agree. As a Desi man, yeah, I mean, we did not talk about these things. It's taken
yeah,
me going through 84, 9/11 tragedies, struggling,
yeah,
finally being able to talk comfortably and say, you know what, yeah, I'm going to talk about this because this is good for my
yeah,
health.
yeah. And you were saying, right, like there are studies now that say, like, if you can accept these things, if you're constantly like pushing these things away, you are not like in alignment with yourself. Like you don't even see yourself as like a 360 complete human being. If you just ignore parts of yourself like that and pretend like they're not there, then they come out at inconvenient times. You don't get to pick when it comes out, but if you actively like process it, heal, etc., there's a better chance that you're not going to have this oopsie moment where you're just like, where did this come from? And you will probably act out of character in a situation. I've definitely done it before. And then I'm like, oh, it's connected to something much deeper that I just decided to completely ignore. And I think,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, one thing I will say, making a Desi connection and a connection back to South Asia as well, you look at all the sort of the philosophical traditions coming out of India, Buddhism and Hinduism and Sikhism and others. If you read take out all the layers, the societal layers, they all talk about, look, there's suffering, we go through ups and downs. You should
Yes.
recognize them. The only way you're going to become a better version of yourself is if you recognize the struggles you're going through rather than hiding them. I think what's happened is over the years, all sort of the layers that society puts on them and misreads them and sort of hides the core truth of these philosophical traditions, which is look yourself in the mirror, see all your vulnerabilities and strengths, figure out a way of how you can learn from them and overcome them. So yeah, I think so. So that's one aspect. And you did also mention that women are a little better at sort of talking about these things. And I just want to say that is one of the superpowers that women have.
Yeah.
It has been a man's world, still is a man's world. I know we've made progress, but it's still a man's world. But despite being it being a man's world, women, have a lot of superpowers. And one of them is, they talk about sort of their difficult times and vulnerability more openly than men do, and that's a superpower that helps you at least find ways of healing. And I think that is something men can learn from women, among many other things, is look, it's okay to share your difficult moments. It's okay to share your vulnerabilities.
Yeah. And even if women haven't had the language to talk about these things in the most explicit terms, at the very least, at least we can cry and no one's going to be like shocked by it. At least we can just express emotion. Even if we can't have an entire discussion about it, at least we can be like, I'm sad and cry, and it's not the most earth-shattering thing. So at that level, we're a little lucky. But I agree. I think also, you look at some of these politicians, some of these world leaders, where it's like, there's something going on here, sir, that you have to work on. And now you are ruining many people's lives at scale because you have not figured out something for yourself personally. So the fact that you're encouraging this also, I think, is something that through your work, which we're going to get into your artistry and like what you've created, I think is just really important, because that's a big reason why I even do this show, is if one person can see that there's like a different way to live your life and that there are options for you and that you aren't alone, just knowing that you're not alone in the things you're feeling is, I think, the most powerful thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes.
And so tell me, let's get into like your work and what you've created. Please talk about your cartoon work. That's a very oversimplification, though, I think, of what you've done.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, this is how I will preface my story. So the year is 2000. I've moved from California to the East Coast, living in Connecticut, working in New York State, just a few miles north of New York City. Just came back into the Sikh faith for the first time. I should say not came back, but, I embraced it for the first time on my own. A long journey, donned my turban for the first time in 10 years, August 2001. So that's the month and year when I'm like, just getting enough, this is what I want to do, my choice.
Oh my gosh.
And then 9/11 happens. And so for the first 2 weeks, and there was an immediate response from some coworkers at the company I was working in. They didn't know me, but they saw me. And within hours after the attacks, I'm getting strange looks. And we're hearing, I heard a friend of mine who got pulled over out from a train in the northeast. So we're talking Maine or Rhode Island, arrested just because he happened to have a turban and beard. So me and my brother were working at the same company at the time, and we told our boss, who happened to be Polish American, that, hey, I think people who look like us, it's going to be a little bit of a difficult time. Can we work from home? So we had a privilege. We were techies. We could work from home. So talk about, telecommuting, virtual environment. This was the early days, but in technology, you had that privilege that, you could, as long as you had internet connection, you can log into work. So our boss was super cool about it. He's like, sure, go ahead and work from home for a couple of weeks or however long you need. And it took us 2 weeks before the men in the family could step out. And we're talking Connecticut, New York State, right? I mean, these are blue kind of progressive, liberal, diverse places, we could not get out. I mean, the women stepped out to do grocery shopping. And when we did step out to drive to work after 2 weeks, I mean, people on the highways would roll down their windows and flip us off and call us. We could tell they're screaming and calling us names. I got called Osama bin Laden very quickly out on the streets. Not, these are not your run-of-the-mill, bigoted, intolerant people. This is everyone. I mean, I had African Americans, Hispanics, whites, men, women, taking, in their vulnerable, fearful, and anxious moments, with, of course, ignorance about other cultures, calling me names, bloodshot eyes, looking at me like, I had somehow done, taken part in 9/11. It was a very difficult moment. I have new friends and acquaintances and others. So this is not just Sikhs. Right after 9/11, you have Hindus, Christians, Jews, Hispanics, Italians, anybody who was brown, and mostly a man, but really brown, was fair game. And they were just so much hate and bias that came out. It was one of the most vulnerable moments America went through in modern history, and it brought out our worst. Now, things have gotten better, and it brought out some good things as well. So I am just so uncomfortable going, wait a minute, here we go again, right? I mean, I'm being told to go back home and call all these names. What do I do? And I knew there's a lot of ignorance about Desi cultures, and especially Sikhs. What do I do about this? And what saved me was there was a cartoon. So everybody's responding to 9/11 and everything. So there was a cartoon by a award-winning cartoonist, Pulitzer-winning cartoonist, Mark Fury, based out of San Francisco. And he created a cartoon capturing the predicament of brown men who are being perceived as terrorists. And he had a Sikh character in there. And I had never seen a Sikh character in a cartoon not being lampooned, not being made fun of. And I was just like, wow, this is pretty powerful. So it took a few weeks, but I had this idea that maybe, I should start using cartoons to capture Sikh stories in America and the predicament of Sikhs. And so I taught myself how to create cartoons. Did it mostly on computer, not on pencil and paper. So I'm mostly a computer-based cartoonist. Started a website called sicktoons.com. So I said, oh, well, cartoons, I'll just change it to sicktoons.com. And I've been doing that since late 2002. Engineer by day, cartoonist by night. And, after a few years, people started reaching out to me, and teachers first saying, hey, we've discovered your work. We'd love to have you come to our school. So I started giving talks in schools and just talking about, my predicament, who Sikhs are, and just in general, issues of intolerance and bigotry and bias. And the pivotal moment came in about 10 years ago, 2011. The first Captain America movie had come out. And I imagine a lot of things in turban and beards because I'm self-projecting. So that, that's one of the big messages I have for everyone is you don't see yourself reflected.
So interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
You don't see yourself reflected in culture. And a lot of, I think, artists do this. Yeah. You don't see yourself reflected. And we have the privilege now of having technology and so much easier access to share your work.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to self-project Sikhs onto everything. So I had this image of Captain America in a turban and beard. And I illustrated it in the image of the cartoons back from 1940s and 50s. And I took that image, that poster, to New York City Comic Con, which is one of the biggest comic festivals on the planet.
Yes.
And it was like, I didn't know how people were going to respond, but people were kind of confused. Some gave thumbs up. Some were like, why is Captain America having a turban and beard? Why is Captain America Muslim? I'm like, well, this Captain America is Sikh, but Captain America could be Muslim. What's wrong with that? It's an imaginary character. But it started conversation. And I'm like, oh, maybe I'm onto something. So there was a photographer in passing, Fiona Abood, who's become a friend of mine now, Jewish American, Brazilian American. She mentioned in passing, Vishavjit, you should dress up as Captain America next year. And I said, no. A very emphatic no. She didn't ask me why. But my reason was, I knew why. I've been bullied all my life. Post 9/11, I've been told to go back home and call all kinds of names. Why would I want to wear a leotard, skin-tight uniform of a fictionary superhero as a skinny man, turban, beard, glasses? Forget it. No. It took a whole year. The Milwaukee massacre at a Gurdwara on a Sunday morning, August 5th, I believe, 2012. That played a role in Fiona convincing me, hey, let's do this. You step out as Captain America. We'll do a photo shoot and we'll push people's perceptions about what it means to be American. So June 2013, I stepped out 8 years ago now. as Captain America, scared, just super scared, because I didn't know how people were going to respond. And
Yeah.
it turned out to be one of the most amazing days of my life. My life has not been the same since. It
Yeah.
was almost like I went into a parallel universe where people were like, whoa, this guy is the coolest American around. I got hugged by strangers. I got photos taken by police officers. I got access to a fire department truck. I got pulled into weddings. That does not happen to people, right? But what I realized is it happened to me because I was dressed in the uniform of a fictional character from 1941. That's the power of stories, of fictional stories.
Yeah.
And so that sort of was a lesson for me. And, eventually I became a storyteller. And I really believe storytelling can change the world for the better and worse as well. It's, race is another story.
Because our stories, they are fake.
Yes.
But they are stories. Yeah.
And one of the biggest fake stories in America, there are many around the globe, but in America, one of the biggest fake stories is race, right? I mean, it's a fake story. Somebody made it up. But that story had devastating consequences because a society decided we're going to live by that story.
Yeah.
And millions were enslaved, killed, tortured. And our entire system today, we're struggling to get out of this system, this whole race issue, is because you live something for 500 years. You just cannot flip it off and just say, oh, you know what, we're not going to follow that story anymore. We do. And so these challenges exist everywhere. Look, from a Desi perspective, we can, of course, say the caste system itself is a story as well, that how do we extract ourselves out? So, but I feel creating new stories can be one way to counter those old fictional stories.
Wow. Oh my God. That was very powerful. And I think I'm so happy that you were received so well, because what you've been through, you had every reason to not do this. You had like tangible proof to not do this. And you took like the biggest chance of all that put yourself probably like in emotional turmoil and potential like could have been physical danger. And you had every reason not to do this. And the fact that you chose otherwise, I think it takes one of those types of moments to make the type of impact and difference that it has. It takes like one person to be like, I'm going to make the most out there decision possible and hope it's for the better. So
And I want to highlight the fact, look, I was scared. I mean, I don't see myself as somebody who's got courage and all, but I mean, I was scared. And sometimes what happens is tragedies force yourself into moments and others nudging you along to somehow go out on a limb and say, you know what, I'm going to try something new. I'm scared, but I'll try it. And sometimes doors open up to beautiful things. And this is one of the stories. And then there's many others. And so to those, who are finding themselves in very difficult moments in life, let's say, there's a door, there is a way out. And sometimes that is trying things that you feel like, gosh, do I really want to do this? Yeah. But if you sometimes, can find that courage with help from other people. And I want to emphasize, I didn't do this alone. They were beautiful souls, sometimes strangers. Fiona, who's become a friend of mine, this was her idea. She was a consummate professional who respectfully nudged me, supported me, and she knew. And I told her, look, Fiona, I am not comfortable doing this.
Yeah.
She knew it. She was super cool about it, very professional. And it's so since that, it's like today that I'm a professional storyteller and a public speaker is because of that Captain America thing. Because after that, so one thing I want to make a Desi connection here. One of the first invitations I got. So what we did is I published an op-ed and we released 6 photographs from that photo shoot, and that went viral. I mean, thousands of people. So one of the first emails I got is from Hari Kondabolu, who
oh my God. Okay,
he's a stand-up comedian from New York. He's a New York homeboy, and so he reaches out to me, and he was working on a late night comedy show at the time called Totally Biased with Kamal Bell, another great comedian.
Yes, their podcast is great.
Harry reached out to me through a common friend of ours, a Sikh New Yorker, saying, would you consider coming on our show? And I said, sure. And I didn't know anything about Harry at the time or Kamal Bell, but I said, sure, I'll do it. And we met. So my second outing in New York City happens a few months later. Was it a few months later? Actually, it was, it was a few months later. And it's Union Square in New York City. We spent hours. And so it turns out, the show came to an end. FX that was hosting the show decided they're going to cancel the show. One of the most diverse late night comedy shows ever. But the last video segment was mine. And it's me and Hari Kondabolu being out there. It was hilarious. It was a funny show, but it was very powerful as well. And that show again, it just opened up so many doors. People just started reaching out to me, and from schools and companies. And eventually, 5-6 years ago, I just decided, okay, I'm going to give up my life as a software engineer, and I'm going to become a full-time storyteller, artist, and performance artist. And that's what I've been doing. So this fictional story has sort of changed my life for the better. And there's a lot of, beautiful people that I've met, strangers who have, because of the mythological story, really have embraced me and therefore opened this door where I can share my story with people who otherwise would not have invited me.
Yeah. And also, I'm a big Marvel fan. And isn't that like Steve Rogers' like entire story? Like he's this really shy kid who gets pulled into this like crazy world. And there's so many parallels. And he was like you said, a white man in the 1940s. And here you are like living this life in so many similar ways. And Marvel, I think the entire universe is such a powerful piece of storytelling. And they are the movies I watch when I am sad. I think the simplicity of hope of this hero arc it just never fails. It just makes you feel good every single time to see good people win. And I think that's what you are going through now. You are just a person who has been through so much and has had to like reckon so much with themselves before like stepping into this like larger than life pair of shoes to, tell an even bigger story that feels accessible to even more people. So that's, oh my God, amazing. I am so happy for you and like what you are doing. It's massive.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's been, I want to give a shout out to a lot of people like Hari and others, strangers who have supported my work, brought me into their classrooms and companies, given me, sort of this other world where I can go and become a storyteller. And I love storytelling now. And that's what I've been doing. Although COVID has put a little bit of a break on it, and I'm looking forward to COVID being behind us. I've done some virtual engagements as well. But yeah, no, I think more than ever, I just cannot emphasize enough that we need to find ways of telling our stories. And there's been I know there's a lot of stories, a lot of artists coming out of South Asian communities in the US and beyond, which is great. We have a long ways to go. We have to change the system, from within and outside. And so we have to keep pushing. We have to keep trying new, innovative things. And a lot of times, we're uncomfortable doing them, but that's what we have to do. You push from the outside, system kind of, pushes from the inside as well, those who've gotten in there. And, we hope that sometime in the near future, everybody in America can say, look, I do see myself represented, right? Right now, there's still a lot of communities who will tell you, I don't see myself reflected in America's entertainment or political or financial world. And hopefully, I'm an optimist, despite the fact that a lot is happening, a lot of conversations and a lot of, what it feels like conflicts. Conflicts are good. What you do with conflicts and what you learn from those conflicts is critical. So I just feel like storytelling is one of the most powerful tools we all have. And we need to figure out ways of telling our stories and listening to other people's stories.
Yeah. Oh my God. Wow. That's amazing. And can I ask, like, what is the youngest audience you've like spoken to, and how do you make these types of concepts like accessible to them?
Yeah. So I get a lot of invites from teachers, and I kindergartners, elementary school, middle school, high school. So I cater my talks. I change them a little bit, but I share my story, and through my story, I talk about sometimes not fitting in, people being mean. And using the power of art and storytelling to tell your story. And and of course, as I go into older age groups, I get into race and bias and other things. But I'll tell you this, and I really mean this. I love working with kids, and the younger they are, the less they have picked up on bias and other things, cultural sort of biases and stereotypes. Some of the greatest questions I've gotten are from kids. Kids are super bright, very intuitive. We think they don't know a lot. They do. So I'll share a couple of questions I've gotten from elementary school kids. This was in Seattle. 1 hour talk I give, 45-minute talk followed by 15-minute Q&A. 2 kids, first graders, asked me these questions. One goes, what if I'm not comfortable with my story? This is a first grader saying, what if I'm not comfortable with my story? So there is some conflicts that are happening in that one first grader's life to even ask me that question. Hey, what if
And
I'm
they're like 6 maybe.
yeah.
6
And then
people.
the second one's saying, what if I don't know how to tell my story? And I'm just going, whoa. I mean, these are,
Oh my
yeah. So and there's so many others. I recently had another. I was a counselor. I hosted a talk for summer campers virtually,
Mhm.
and I introduced my story. So these are, again, elementary school kids, maybe middle schoolers. And I'm starting to share my story, and we're talking about stories and fictional stories. And I told them, hey, there's another story. It's called Race, and it's a fictional story. Do you know anything about it? One of the third, maybe fourth graders says, yeah, Race is, it's a fictional made up story that we are now struggling to live with. And I'm just like, I'm just blown away by the wisdom of young kids who know so much more. So to all the parents and adults out there, we went through that stage.
God.
We
Yeah.
need to connect with the kid inside us, learn from kids, give them the freedom to ask you questions. Don't get offended by the kids don't have filters. And that is what I love about them. Because kids would say to me, yeah, but what is this? What is this?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll answer it. Kids don't say, "Oh, you're not an American. Go back home." They don't.
Yeah.
Well,
They
they
don't.
learn that by the
Yeah.
time they're in high school sometimes. But that is why I love working with kids, because they haven't learned a lot of the biases that we learn, and they ask just questions as they come to them.
That's incredible. I'm shocked. I'm like, did I have even? I mean, I like to think I was a pretty knowledgeable first grader, but at the same time, like the depth of those questions, I would have been like shocked in the moment. I would have been like, what did you say? Like,
So
yeah,
I get hope in humanity because of
yeah,
that. Kids
yeah,
give me hope. I really do believe kids today are a heck of a lot more open than when I was their age.
yeah,
So we are making that progress, and I feel comfortable in saying this, that the mess we're leaving for these kids who are going to grow up to be future leaders, I think they're better equipped than I am, and my parents are, to deal with the mess we're going to leave them. Climate change and all kinds of other inequities, I think they are. But again, it's very critical. You give them space to ask those questions. I'm very open about my vulnerabilities, even with kids. I tell them, look, I'm not perfect. I got problems. Once that's how you want to get kids' trust, to tell them you're not going to tell them what to do. Tell them,
yeah,
look, I try my level best, but I
yeah,
make mistakes as well. And then kids open up, and they're like, okay, all right, this, they're not that different than me. I can learn from them.
yeah. Oh my God, because I mean, guilt, empathy, shame, they have all of those things. They're just more, they just don't have like the vocab for it,
Yeah.
but they feel all those things. And I would really love to know what that like what those two first graders were going through. Like, I think that would
Yeah,
be
I don't know,
to figure
but
out.
the principal emailed me
Yeah.
saying, she's like, I have never had my kids open up ever that way, and thank you for coming and doing that. And what the sort of the key lesson here, for any and everyone who's listening, is just be honest about your story with your kids and family members.
Yes.
You create that space, and kids and family members, they'll fly with that, and they'll go out into a world better prepared. We do injustice to our kids by not talking about, hey, it's okay to be vulnerable, it's okay to have weaknesses, because when we tell kids, hey, we're not going to talk about that, you know what, it's going to happen. They're going to struggle, they're going to have ups and downs, and now you have told them, hide your weaknesses, hide your vulnerabilities. We should be talking about our vulnerabilities in schools, in our homes, in our places of worship, in our workplaces, and that's something we have in common. We all go through it. And it's just that we are raised, it took me two tragedies in my life, two tragedies that I could have lost my life in, to learn this lesson. And so please, open up about your vulnerabilities. That's what our faith traditions teach us too. I mean, India is so full of faith tradition, and they all talk about this, but we just, through all those layers, we just kind of hiding them.
Yeah, we forget like the actual important lessons. We only
Yes.
remember the things that where we are able to chastise other people to make ourselves feel better and holier. We forget like the actual
And what are, this thing that we have, what are people going to say? What are people going to think? That just,
Yeah.
that's one of the biggest barriers in our lives, not only in Desi culture, even in American culture, but more so in Desi culture. What are people going to say? That's the worst thing you can do to yourself in your personal evolution and growth.
Oh my gosh. Wow. This was so powerful. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your story. I am truly blown away, and I can't even probably comprehend how many people you have helped just by being visible and being out there and being willing to talk about these things, because like I said, it's probably not easy and you have had to contend with so much to get to where you are, but I think so many people are better for it, and you have probably shown so many people there's a different way to like live, and you don't have to carry the things that you're taught that you need to carry, and practice feeling your emotions and processing things in the ways that have been prescribed in the past. So this was such a moving conversation. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for your insightful questions.
Yeah.
This is actually one of the really better interviews that I've done, where we've sort of talked about things.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't get to talk about. So no, thank you very much for your wonderful questions. And
Thank you. Listen, I only want to be like those first graders. Like, those questions are incredible. Like,
yes.
I want to be them. And
I do. Yeah, it's a great goal to be. We want to be like those kids.
Yeah. And is there anything else that you wanted to say that's like on your mind, or any parting thoughts that we didn't get to cover?
No, I mean, I think as we mark this 20th anniversary for 9/11, a very painful moment in American history, and it changed the world in many ways too. We need to find ways of connecting with others, even those we feel might be very different from us, might even not share our belief systems. We do share a lot in common. So we have to take it upon ourselves, even those who are committing acts of bias and racism. I believe I have things in common with them. We have things in common with them. We just need to figure out ways of talking with them. I don't believe there are racist people out there. There are racist moments out there. Good people commit acts of racism as well, and I've faced those. I've been called Osama bin Laden, not by just somebody who's 24-hour racist. Good people who commit acts of bias in those moments. So we're not that different from each other. It's just that moments happen, good and bad moments happen, and we need to figure out ways of having more of those good moments, but not hide the bad moments as well. Exactly. So yeah, that's the big message I have. And share your stories. Keep sharing your stories in their full truth and transparency. Don't hide anything.
Thank you so much. And like you said, as this 20th anniversary comes up, I think if you're South Asian, just take care of each other. And like you said, talk to someone if something happens. And also, not to plug, but genuinely Saas for Cause has a ton of resources. If you do come into contact with something that is difficult or uncomfortable, you need to be connected with a therapist or any resources, like please reach out to them, because you bring up a great point. It is the 20th year anniversary, and we hope that people are going to move in compassion. But in case, like you said, someone is having one of those moments, there are resources. Please use them. Thank you so much again for being here today.
Thank you very much, Parshini. Have a wonderful time.
Thank you. You too.
This is Bharat FM.
बजेगा भारत, झूमेगा भारत.
ये है भारत FM.
बजेगा भारत, झूमेगा भारत.